The afternoon sun spilled golden light through the mall's massive windows, bathing the bustling walkways in warmth. His hand clasped my wrist, firm yet casual, leading me through the sea of shoppers. His grip was never painful, but it was unmistakably commanding, possessive. It sent a tingle up my arm, a mixture of apprehension and longing that I could never quite explain. I followed obediently, my chest brushing slightly against the fabric of my blouse with every hurried step, the sensation adding to the heat slowly rising in me. The stares of strangers didn't escape me. Their eyes flicked over my curves, my small waist, the generous swell of my chest, the subtle sway of my hips beneath my skirt. Shame flushed my cheeks as I kept my gaze down, my legs carrying me beside his as if on autopilot. I hated the attention, the way their looks made me feel exposed, but I hated even more how it thrilled me. Each glance seemed to confirm what his always told me I was his to show off. A trophy, a temptation that others could only dream of touching. And now, I had an inkling of where he was taking me to prove, once again, that I was entirely his. The fire exit door loomed ahead, inconspicuous to the world around us, yet heavy with unspoken promise. My stomach twisted as we neared it, dread and anticipation colliding in an intoxicating swirl. I glanced up at his, catching the sharp gleam in his dark eyes. He didn't need words to communicate what he intended. His gaze alone stripped me bare. My legs wavered beneath me, my body already reacting in ways I couldn't control. He pushed open the heavy metal door, and the din of the mall was snuffed out, replaced by the eerie silence of the stairwell. The cold, sterile scent of concrete and steel enveloped us, and my breath caught in my throat as the door clanged shut behind us. I hesitated, my pulse hammering in my ears, but he didn't pause. His hand slid to the small of my back, urging me forward. The first words he spoke came in a low, gravelly whisper. Here. Before I could respond, his hands found my waist, pulling me back against the unyielding wall. The cool concrete bit into my shoulders, a stark contrast to the heat radiating from his body. My lips parted in protest, soft, uncertain, but he silenced me with a kiss, his mouth claiming mine with an urgency that left me breathless. His lips were rough, insistent, and I couldn't help but melt under his touch. My hands pressed against his chest, a futile attempt to ground myself as his fingers began to roam. They traced the curve of my hips, slipping beneath the hem of my blouse to caress the bare skin of my waist. Every touch sent shivers down my spine, igniting a fire that pooled low in my belly. My voice trembled. My knees threatened to give way as his lips trailed, from my mouth to the sensitive skin of my neck, nipping lightly before soothing with his tongue. The sensation was maddening, a push and pull that left me desperate, for more even as shame coiled in my stomach. He turned me then, his hands firm but gentle as he guided me to face the wall. My palms pressed against the cold surface for support as his body pressed against mine from behind. The weight of him, the sheer dominance in his movements, left me weak and pliant in his hands. I gasped as his fingers slid beneath my skirt, hiking it up to expose me completely. The cool air kissed my skin, making me hyper-aware of every nerve ending. "Perfect," he murmured, his voice thick with approval. I bit my lip, my face burning as he took his time, his hands exploring every inch of me with deliberate intent. The intimacy of his touch sent waves of heat through me, and despite my embarrassment, I arched into him, silently begging for more. When he entered me, it was swift and demanding, a claim that left no room for hesitation. I cried out, the sound echoing through the empty stairwell, but his didn't falter. His hands gripped my hips, pulling me back into him with each thrust, his pace unrelenting. My fingers curled against the concrete as pleasure and shame warred within me. The thought of being caught by someone opening the door and seeing us like this made my heart race with fear and something darker, something I didn't want to name. "Louder," he urged, his voice a dark, velvety command in my ear. His breath was hot against my skin, his movements pushing me to the edge. I whimpered, my body trembling as I tried to stifle my cries. But his grip tightened, his fingers digging into my flesh in a way that made me shudder. "Let them hear you," he growled, his tone dripping with satisfaction. My resolve crumbled. I let go, surrendering to the waves of sensation that crashed over me, each one pulling me deeper into the haze of desire. His pace quickened, his breath ragged against my neck as he drove us both closer to release. The world narrowed to the two of us, the sound of our bodies moving together, the intoxicating heat that consumed us. When I finally shattered, it was with a cry that echoed through the stairwell, my body trembling as pleasure rippled through me. He followed moments later, his grip on me tightening as he buried himself deep, his release leaving him breathless and satisfied. For a moment, we stayed like that, his body pressed against mine, his forehead resting against my shoulder. My legs felt like jelly, my cheeks flushed with heat as reality crept back in. Shame and exhilaration mingled in my chest. But I couldn't bring myself to regret it, not when he turned me back around. His eyes soft with affection, a rare smile tugging at his lips. "You're mine," he said, his voice low and possessive. I nodded, my heart pounding as he kissed me again, this time slower, gentler. His hand smoothed my skirt back into place, his touch lingering on my hips before he stepped back, adjusting his own clothing. As we left the stairwell, his hand found mine, lacing our fingers together in a gesture so casual it felt almost innocent. But the heat in his eyes as he glanced at me said otherwise. My cheeks burned, the memory of what we'd done etched into my skin. But I couldn't stop the small smile that played on my lips. Despite the shame, despite the fear, there was a part of me that loved how his made me feel wanted, desired, and entirely his.